live in a simulation? Does the Matrix glitch around us? Or are there multiple universes and perhaps we just skip between them? And if that's the case, are we leaving behind our loved ones in a totally different universe when we skip? In this video, I'm going to be telling you and showing you stories of people who claim to have skipped universes, and it's such a common thing that by the end of this video, you might just find yourself convinced.
Surprise! Before
we get to all that, please do click that like button, subscribe and ding this bell, because it's all coming up right after this. Hey everyone, welcome back to Real Wizardry, where we make your life more magical. My name's Neil, it says so down there, and I'm going to be your magical host. And in today's video, we're talking about skipping universes. I'd like you to imagine, if you will, the following scenario happening to you. You're a 35-year-old woman. I know, go with it, driving down a country road, having just picked up your young daughter from nursery. It's about 8 p.m. and it's North America in the winter, so it's dark. You pull out of a side road onto the main road and bam! Suddenly you're 3 miles down the road and you don't know how you got there. You consider slamming your foot on the brake pedal and coming to a screeching halt. But you keep the car steady, or as steady as you can, and then the weirdest thing happens. A small voice perks up from the back seat. It's your 3-year-old daughter, and she says,
"Mummy, crash!"
Hold up, okay, what?
"Mummy, crash!"
That's just a story though, right? No. I mean, yes, it is a story, but this is a story that I heard on TikTok from this lady.
Then I turned onto the main road that leads into our little town.
And yes, okay, I know that this isn't the most reliable of sources, but regular viewers to this channel will recall a story that I told a while ago that was scarily similar to this one. You see, I was driving home through the back streets and my son, Daniel, who was about 3 at the time, this guy, told me to slow down because he didn't want to die like he did last time when he was riding his motorbike. Okay, I'm paraphrasing so I don't bore people who have heard this story before, but are these two stories related in a way? In the first story, this lady's story, did she skip universes? I read the comments on that video, and some people suggested that it was an upgrade to the Matrix, or the system in which she lived, a glitch in the simulation in which we all live. So I guess the question here is, are we really living in a simulation? Well, sure, it's possible, and how do we know if we are, or even if we're not? This isn't a new idea, by the way. It's a theory called the simulation hypothesis, and it's an idea that external reality is constructed in such a way that it would convince its inhabitants that it is real, whatever real means. The idea actually dates all the way back to ancient Greece. Of course, back then they didn't have computers, as such, if you ignore such things as the Antikythera mechanism, an impossibly old analogue computer that was so complex at the time that it really shouldn't have existed that long ago. Maybe I'll talk about that in a future video, hopefully. Anaxarchus and Monimus of ancient Greek philosophy likened reality to scene painting, brought on by dreaming or madness, and they have a point. The worrying thing is that the recent versions of this idea of the simulation hypothesis really being nothing more than a means for control or simulation was made popular by movies like The Matrix and people like Nick Bostrom. When I was researching this video, I thought, this name sounds familiar, and it's because about 4 years ago I read a book called Superintelligence written by Nick Bostrom. It's possibly the hardest book I've ever managed to get through. If words like recalcitrance don't put you off, perhaps this will. In the book, Nick Bostrom talks through scenarios of what might happen for us to make a super intelligent machine consciousness. Every single scenario Bostrom talks through leads to humans being either enslaved or destroyed entirely. His scenario planning skills are pretty impressive, and not only is his argument persuasive, it's also terrifying. You see, if artificial intelligence reaches superintelligence level, human life on this planet will almost certainly end. And even if it doesn't, our activity on Earth will be controlled by it. And if we're being totally honest, that might not be a bad thing in terms of our surroundings. So do we live in a simulation? What is déjà vu? Even writing this script right now, I have the disconcerting feeling that I've seen this exact scenario playing out before. So do we live in a simulation? What is deja vu? It's weird, and thinking about it now that I'm actually filming it, it does happen to us all. But is it just a trick of a very tired brain, or have I really seen this before? So do we live in a simulation? What is deja vu? Even within our own reality, there are so many bizarre things that seem implausibly unlikely, and yet they are real. Think, for example, of the idea of genes, tiny little molecules within a DNA strand that control the way we look and our bodies and how they react to certain things. Genes were thought about before DNA was discovered. In fact, the ancient Greeks coined the term atom. Democritus in the 5th century BC described what it is and what it does way before 1926, when the first electron microscope lens was developed, and then the first electron microscope was demonstrated in 1931, a couple of years later. So just to be clear, that's about 1,500 years before proof of such things existed. They were talking about atoms in ancient Greece. This makes me think that perhaps these things are only there simply because we look for them. And we'll come back to that in just a moment, but the idea that we're living in a simulation is one that's had a lot of backing from a lot of people. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, but in America in the mid-2010s, 2 people were employed by an unknown but clearly very financially rich entity to investigate and to provide proof that we are indeed living in a simulation. What many people believe is that as we're travelling through time, the human race develops artificial intelligence, or AI, and an environment in which it can live and simulate the world that we know of. That AI does the same thing, growing so intelligent that eventually it wants to do the same and create more AI, totally unaware of the fact that they are an AI themselves living in their own simulation. They own an AI, and their own AI becomes intelligent, and so it keeps on growing. Now, this is a fairly convincing argument because it suggests that there's only one in an infinite possibility that we are the first iteration of life, and that every single other experience of reality was made by someone or something else. In all likelihood, we are not only simulations of life, but we will create life ourselves, and we were made by an artificial life too. This is a good argument for God, by the way. Perhaps the only good argument I've ever heard, but I digress. Now, the problem is this. In this example that I've just mentioned, it sounds like we are 1 in infinity chance of being real, meaning that we have a pretty small chance of being objectively real. Okay, but in this reality, and I'll call it that for the sake of a better definition right now, in this reality, we haven't made artificial life. Not really. We can't really say that our smart home is particularly smart. Not yet, anyway. We're working on AI, but it isn't sentient, or even if it were, would we be able to make a realistic simulation of reality for that life right now? I don't think so. And this means that either we are the very first in this infinite string ready to create AI and a simulation in which to house it, or the very last in a long line because we're not quite there yet. We're getting there, but we're not quite there because we're going to keep on going in that line, but we haven't got there yet. So that's 2 options. So that's 1/2. 1 in 2 is 50% chance. Our odds of a multiple reality, or our reality being a simulation, just collapsed from 1 in infinity down to 1 in 2. So it might be, or it might not be. And what would we do anyway? Well, physicist Neil deGrasse Tyson said that the best thing to do is to act like you're not in a simulation and play by the rules of what we call reality, because even if you are in a simulation right now, there are laws of physics and rules of reality that you just can't alter. And I like that idea. I said I'd come back to the idea of seeing things simply because you look for them, and this sounds like manifestation or creating with thought, and it kind of is. It raises questions about a whole bunch of stuff, because the only reason we discovered other planets is because someone thought about it and thought about the idea and then started looking for evidence to prove it. The only reason that we found exoplanets and black holes and neutron stars is the same. People looked. If we expand this still further, the whole idea about science starts with a hypothesis, an idea, and then testing it. Is it true? Is it not? And if not, could it be true in a different way, in a different place, under different circumstances? I'm a huge one for this kind of thinking because, to a large extent, I believe that we can skip to the world that we want to live in purely by thinking ourselves there. And I know that's not exactly what's happening in these stories, but it might as well be. Sometimes it's dramatic, like the stories I've told at the beginning of this video. Other times it's more subtle or nuanced, like me finding the perfect armchair on the side of the road being given away for free just 30 seconds or so after mentioning that I wanted one exactly like it. Now don't get me wrong, that armchair wasn't entirely perfect. It needed some repair work. Maybe I didn't manifest it properly. It's nothing major, but it did need some TLC. And perhaps I didn't skip to the absolute perfect universe iteration that I needed to, but if you want to be happy, there is one thing I'm absolutely certain about. You must be positive in yourself, happy with the life you lead, believe you have strength, power, ingenuity and magic within yourself, that you can and will manifest a perfect life. Draw to you the perfect love, the ideal friends, plenty of wealth, happiness and abundance into your life because you are worth it. And this one life is all you have to live, and it's going to be awesome. Thanks very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, ding that bell, and check out the links down in the description for social medias, website and memberships like these awesome people, and I'll be back next time with some more magical awesomeness. But until next time, as always,
Magical.